Alright, it's time to talk about Nightmare Reaper, a game I have been wanting to talk about for a while, but it has taken me forever to actually finish completing it the couple of times that I have. And it's also a game that has a lot of story and stuff that I want to cover and talk about more in depth than I usually do. So, without further ado, let's just get right into it. So, what is Nightmare Reaper? Nightmare Reaper is a game where you play as a woman in an insane asylum fighting off her demons using the most wacky guns you could imagine. I'm not exaggerating when I say this game is the equivalent of putting Borderlands and Doom together. It is at times so stupid that it will cause the game to lag with the sheer amount of shit that's happening on screen. It's very often actually that, especially when you get into New Game Plus, where you have modifiers up your butt and there's so many things going on all at the same time. It's not that that's a bad thing. I find that to be quite fun. I think it's great that the game allows you to actually go so wild that it will lag itself out. But that being said, I think there's also something to be said about the fact that it can do that, because a lot of developers tend to sort of cap you when it comes to power. Nightmare Reaper doesn't. I have had miniguns that shoot fireballs. I have had books that shoot larger than the map bullets. I have seen everything in this game. And honestly, it's not bad. I quite enjoy it. Now, like I mentioned, there are some really fun gun bullets and gun combos in this game. Another one that I would love to point out is my chicken gun. And this is a shotgun, and I would like to explain to you how it works in Nightmare Reaper. In Nightmare Reaper, when you have a shotgun, it shoots 2 pellets. Fair enough. Each pellet consists of about 12 bullets. That means 12 projectiles per. If you then get the random projectiles modifier on your gun, it can turn that bullet into anything. In this case, in the scenario you're watching in front of you, it turns them into gummy chickens, or rather the dog toy squishy chicken type of thing. And now you might be thinking, okay, that's cool and all, but like, what about the sound? Well, just listen. Just listen to the chicken sound. So as you saw, that was the chicken gun. Now I have another example of a gun that I find kind of fun. This was a double-barrel shotgun I got. Again, same principle, 12 bullets per pellet. Now it has 2 pellets and it can shoot both at once by right-clicking. However, I got the random bullet modifier on it again. And I'm just gonna let the video explain it itself. Now, to say that there isn't more weapon combos and shit, that would be a lie. There is a lot more weapon combos, there's a lot more weapons that you haven't seen yet. One of them includes a literal wall that shoots cannonballs, a literal like wall of a pirate ship. You also have a genie bottle in a barrel. There are so many different weapons that it will be hard to list them all here, to be quite frank. But, that being said, I think it's also important to talk about the level design, because each of the levels are procedurally generated. Now, you can see that as being a negative or a positive. I will say I mainly see it as being a positive here in this game's case, and I'll explain why in a second, but before I do that, I want to explain the tile sets. So, when discussing tile sets in Nightmare Reaper, you have to discuss sort of how they relate to the story of the game. Because in the story of the game, you play as this woman who's in an asylum, and the reason she's in there is because of the abuse she has suffered at the hands of her parents, in particularly her mother. And it goes really dark to a degree where I don't really think I can discuss it at all on YouTube. And while it's probably not the most accurate portrayal of mental health, considering the fact that you got picked up in the asylum because you murdered people, and not everybody who suffered from trauma or in any other way suffered like that ends up being murderers, it does serve its purpose fairly well for the game. So in the game, the cure to your mental health, like the way you can get over your trauma, is through getting into your mind palace and just shooting the shit. You're literally doing Sherlock Holmes, where he's like getting into his mind and, walking around. But you're doing that with different areas and guns, and a lot of demons that you need to banish. And what's really cool about it is that the levels relate directly to the character's mental health states. To give you an example of what I mean by that, in the first chapter of the game, you start out in the Hollow Stone, which is like this dark cave area. Then you go into the Spore Pits, which is still just a cave, but this time it's illuminated by some fungi. Then you go into a forest, and then a little village with like trees around it, so like a forest village, right? Then you come into a labyrinth, and then a medieval settlement, and then you go into some tunnels and so on, right? Like areas that makes sense, essentially. Then in one of the latter areas in chapter 1, you go into a lava cave with alien structures. It goes fully out there, like really just out there, because you're at the like end of that chapter, so now they're pulling no punches and the area is not making any sense because it's literally in the insane character's head. And that's the same thing for chapter 2. You start out in a giant open area with like multiple ways you can go. Then you go into an office building and like storehouses, or you can go to some catacombs and stuff. And it's the same thing, like in next area you get another couple of options. You can either go to some ports, you can go on a ship, you can go into factories, and then at the end of it, you can go to Alcatraz. Like, it just goes so far out there, but it is not better seen than in the very last area of the game. In the very last area of the game, you start out, again, fairly, not normal, but like believable enough. You start out in a war zone, and then you go to a space station. However, then you continue a little bit, and you get into the Sorcerer's Mansion, which is like the hub area of the next part of Chapter 3. In that area, you have floating islands in space, and you have the Crushing Depths, which is just an ancient civilization underwater. In the final area of Chapter 3, you go to the Flesh Pits. Just let that sink in. You have broken down reality to a degree where you're running around in a fleshy tube of, flesh and caves and shit. And it is disgusting, quite frankly, and it fits really well with how the game presents itself. Because the entire story is actually not told to you directly through cutscenes or anything else like it usually would be. It is literally on the side of a table on notes. And I'll give you a little example of how it's presented here.
I had been anticipating the first meeting with the patient with a blend of doubt and excitement. What had I gotten myself into? The previous physician had failed to improve the patient's condition and had managed to get rid of her for dubious reasons.
So, to talk about the delivery of the story, I think it's actually delivered fairly fine. It's not the main focus of the game, obviously. That's sticking around with the weapon combos and different perks and stuff you can get on your weapons. And they can go crazy, as you've seen. But I think the story itself is really good for what it is. It definitely gripped me personally. And honestly, while it isn't the focus, I definitely think something you should give a listen to. The entire thing, once you have all the pages on, it takes about 8 minutes to listen to, so it's not super bad. However, to get back on subject, I feel like we should be talking about why I think procedural generation honestly is the right pick here. And that's simply a numbers game. Procedural generation is really good when you need to have the amount of levels that we have in Nightmare Reaper. Nightmare Reaper isn't a huge project, there isn't a huge studio behind it, essentially. It is a indie game made by an indie developer, and it's a small team behind it, so seeing, them use procedural generation makes sense to create as much content as they have. And I think that's a good thing, I think it's used right here. Plus, the reality of Nightmare Reaper is it's Diablo, essentially. You're going to be replaying through that campaign again and again. And if you knew the exact enemy placements, it would get incredibly boring incredibly fast. The fact you don't can keep it sort of interesting while still getting a little bit older on your 4th playthrough. But, it's still there, it's still good, and it sort of still keeps it going a little bit. It's very much like Remnant 2 does it, where, yes, you have seen it before, however, it does keep it interesting enough to keep the replay value there for a little while. Now, with all that being said, we can also talk about the leveling system, because that's quite different from other games. You can make it more similar, but by base it isn't. You see, leveling in Nightmare Reaper is done by you collecting either topazes, emeralds or normal coins. Normal coins are gained through just playing the game, Killing stuff can give you coins, and just literally walking around can give you money as well. However, if you want emeralds as an example, you need to go into the arena, which are specific levels where that literally just a wave mode, and they get harder with every wave and whatnot. And then last you have the topaz tree, which essentially is, in the game it's called taking pills, but essentially what you do is have a negative modifier active on you by default. That can be anywhere from extra chances at negative events to extra chances at positive events, which will give you a toxicity level, and depending on that, you get more topazes or you get less topazes. Now, when you go into actually upgrade the, levels and whatnot, you will get old minigames. And when I say minigames, I mean they're like games from back in the day. There can be Pokemon. One of them is a clone of Space Invaders, I think. And the last one is Super Mario Bros. Like, it's literally Super Mario Bros. Within Nightmare Reaper. All of them can feel quite clunky and sort of take you out of it. I'm personally not the hugest fan, so after recording what I needed to, I literally just disabled them for the rest of the playthrough, as that is an option you have. You are forced into using them. The upgrades can be fairly fucking good, because in Nightmare Reaper you can only keep one weapon to begin with, meaning that you have 4 weapon slots open, but you can only keep one with you. And that's allowed as being like a level 1 weapon, so your base shotguns and stuff. Then once you've upgraded for a bit, you can keep a level 2 weapon, so your double barrel shotgun. And then once you've upgraded one more time, you can get to, keep a tier 3 or level 3 weapon, that being something like the orbital laser, the nukes you find, stuff like that. And that way there's like this ranking system of like tiered weapons. Not that they necessarily matter too much, as even a level 1 gun can be useful throughout the entire game if it's rolled well. I personally used the grenade launcher for practically the entirety of the game. That is level 1, and it's really good because it has a really good roll. And the same thing sort of applies to every weapon in the game. It's not necessarily the weapon that matters, but you can't keep certain weapons until you have upgraded yourself far enough to get there. Otherwise, there are the base just stat bumps, like extra headshot damage, extra HP, and so on. And they are in each of the, skill trees. The big one being the coin skill tree. That's also the one that has everything where you can like get extra jumps. You can get everything from like that to extra chances on good weapons. You can get extra spaces to keep your weapons, stuff like that. And on top of all of that, you also have a pet system. Pets are found specifically in the emerald section of your upgrade tree, and they are literally just purchased outright, and they can go from healing pets to collecting to shooting and so on. I use shooting and collecting quite a bit, and I think they're quite awesome. They're a cute little addition to the game. Not that it was necessary, but it's nice to have, and honestly, I kind of enjoy it. I think it's super fun. Which brings us to another thing this game does super well, and that is Easter eggs. Nightmare Reaper is probably one of those games I've played that has the most references to other games ever. Whether it be Stalker, Doom, it's sometimes just something random like just having chickens pop up, or if you're fighting Civvy in a random wall. I have never played a game with quite this many Easter eggs and extra secrets to find. Anywhere from shooting Minecraft blocks to finding a Half-Life microwave. There are a lot of Easter eggs. I'm just going to roll a montage meanwhile we're talking about it here. And honestly, I think all of them are fairly good. The main thing is that they don't add anything major, but they don't need to, really. They're just sort of fun side things you can find and do within the game, and some of them can really help you with your progress, because they give you quite a bit of currency. Alright, so now we've talked about the events, we've talked about the skill trees, the guns, and a little bit of everything when it comes to Nightmare Reaper. And there's one more thing we have to talk about, and that's the boss fights. They can be fairly boring, in my opinion, and that's partially because often they're just a reskinned enemy, and that isn't essentially the most interesting thing ever. While they're definitely not bad and they serve their purpose as just being an obstacle, it can get kind of stale, especially at your third playthrough. Now, that being said, are they bad? No. But they aren't good either. They're just they're there to be there, and that's fine. There's much more to say about that. And as like you can call it an ending note, I want to talk a little bit about the endgame and the future of Nightmare Reaper as well. Now, when discussing the future of Nightmare Reaper, I think it looks bright, to just say it outright. As the developer is still active on social media, they're still updating the game. We recently got the city update, which added a bunch of, city projectiles and modifiers to your gun. And a couple of examples is the poop gun. There's also a balloon gun now. You can get carrots. And there is also the chickens. They were all added with the city update. And in addition to that, the developers are also still active working on a multiplayer mode for Nightmare Reaper, which I'm looking forward to seeing how that pans out, because Nightmare Reaper is already crazy. I can only imagine what it would be like if you were 2 players. And in addition to that, I just think Nightmare Reaper is incredibly good. The endgame loop, albeit that it literally just loop around you, getting better guns, is still super fun and is super viable up to about New Game Plus 7, I think, is where the enemies start to one-shot you, where it will get incredibly hard. Not that I've gotten there myself, I've only gotten to New Game Plus 3. And also on this final note, I just want to mention that all of what I've said here is done to the most banging metal soundtrack I have heard in a while. It is just insanely good, and I highly recommend just going and listening to it, outside of this video. I'll link to it down in the description. Nightmare Reaper is a really cool game, and it's a game that I first played a couple of years ago, and then re-picked it up to make this video, because I think it is super fucking dope. It was introduced to me by Civic when I was watching his video on it, and I think, it was pretty much an insta-sell for me. It is what would happen if Borderlands and Doom had a child, and I absolutely adore it. The sheer amount of different combos and stuff you can pull out on your weapons increase the replay value infinitely. I think the game is overall really good, and it's super impressive that the developer managed to pull this out, especially considering the fact that this is apparently built on a custom-made engine as well. All that is to say that Nightmare Reaper is really good, and it's really worth your money. I played it for 98 hours, and that's my total playthrough for 3 different completions for New Game Pluses, and you can in theory go infinitely with the New Game Plus. That's sort of your end game, like just playing Arena or going for New Game Pluses, which not essentially the most fun end game to have, but it serves the game fairly well considering the fact that you will literally just be hunting that next insanely rolled weapon, and you will continue to do that throughout the entirety of the game. It's what it's about, and it's also why it's fucking awesome. That being said, thank you for watching the video. This has been by far my longest project. I spent 98 hours just playing Nightmare Reaper, let alone the time I've spent edited the video, and so on. It's also the video with the most edits and stuff for me ever. So thank you so much for watching. I, as always, really appreciate that you're here with me today, and the fact that you're listening to this means you've made it to the end somehow. Thank you for that as well. And other than that, I will see you all later. I hope you have a wonderful day. And if it's evening, I hope you have a wonderful evening. Again, thank you so much for tagging along with this. This has taken me multiple months to make. So, I'm happy that you came along for the journey. I will see you all later. Bye.